tēnei takiwā. Ka te māmoe a waitaha, a kaitahu whānui katoa, a tēnā koutou katoa. Ka runaka o tākou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. E nā mana, e nā reo, raurangatira mā, tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa. Nau mai haere mai ki tēnei whakanui, nau mai haere mai ki tēnei kōrero. Ko Grant Robertson tuku ingoa, ko na tumu whakarai ki o tākou whakaihu waka. Welcome everybody, welcome to the inaugural professorial lecture of Professor Elaine Hargreaves. You clap when I say that. I want to acknowledge this evening the academic party who joined me here. Professor Charles Brennan, the Pro Vice-Chancellor of Sciences, who's on day 3, so cut him a bit of slack when he gets up in a minute. Professor Mike Sam, Acting Dean, School of Physical Education, Sport and Exercise Sciences. Professor Diane Sika-Pautonu, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Pacific, and Distinguished Professor Greg Cook, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Research and Innovation. And to all of you, nau mai, haere mai, welcome along. I want to especially acknowledge today the special guests for Elaine. I'll pause, because some of them have just arrived. I want to acknowledge Elaine's husband Gareth and children Talia and Anya. I also want to acknowledge Elaine's parents Anne and Colin Rose. And online, hello to everybody online, mother and father-in-law Janet and Keith Hargreaves, who are watching from Waikanae in the North Island, and everybody else who is watching us online. I want to make a special acknowledgement of Elaine's family. Everybody knows that in the work to become a professor, you sacrifice a lot. You work hard and you have to give your full commitment. That in turn means significant sacrifices for family. So I want to acknowledge Elaine's family today as a critical part in her success, and on behalf of the University of Otago, offer our thanks for the sacrifices that you've made. Please show your appreciation to Elaine's family. Very shortly, Professor Charles Brennan, the Pro Vice-Chancellor, will formally introduce Elaine tonight. But Elaine, I want to take this opportunity on behalf of the university to thank you for your extraordinary contribution to our university. Those who know a little bit about professorial promotions in the university will know that you have to excel in 3 areas, and in research, in teaching, and in service. And there is absolutely no doubt, as you will shortly hear from Charles, that Elaine has achieved that. We were just discussing some of Elaine's research before we came in. When I look at the research output from Elaine, it's impressive at an academic level. Citations abound. There is also an enormous amount of translational research. And we were just talking about the Are You Fit campaign, which Elaine will describe shortly, which is an incredible example of turning academic research into real-world outcomes, and I want to acknowledge you for that, Elaine. I also want to acknowledge your teaching and your inspiration that you have given to students over the many years that you have been here, and your contribution to curriculum development as well. And in the third category, in service, I want to acknowledge your time as Dean of the school and thank you for your commitment to the school over that period of time. You can tell that this is a person who has contributed across our university, and I'm immensely proud to be here tonight to celebrate you, Elaine, to celebrate your promotion to Professor and the contribution that you've made to Otago Whakaihu Waka. So, nau mai, haere mai anō, welcome again. Thank you all for being here today, and it's now my pleasure to introduce the Pro Vice-Chancellor of Sciences, Professor Charles Brennan.
Professor Robertson, tēnā koa. Professor Cook, Professor Sika-Pautonu, tēnā koa no. Professor Hargreaves, Professor Sam, tēnā kōrero. Friends and colleagues, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. As Grant mentioned in the introduction to me, it's all about me today. This is my 3rd day on the job, And it is a great pleasure that it is my third day, and I've got this opportunity to introduce Elaine. We had a catch-up earlier this morning, and it was revealing to see the breadth of her research, and also how we've interchanged between the UK and also New Zealand and elsewhere. It is my great pleasure to introduce Elaine, Professor Elaine Hargreaves, from the School of Physical Education, Sport and Exercise Science, who will be delivering her very special inaugural professorial lecture, Simple Choice, Understanding Motivation to be Physical Active. It was so appealing that actually my wife, Margaret, who's in the audience, came along. And I can see that the audience is jam-packed full now of people who are wanting to hear your research. So that speaks volumes in terms of not only the academic point of view, but as Grant mentioned, sort of the impact that you're creating throughout society. Elaine's academic journey has been characterized by that deep commitment to communicating the benefits of science and physical education and physical activity to help build lasting and impactful resolution to society, building change, building behavioral change for public health. And I asked Elaine for some personal reflections early on the journey that she's taken. And one of the things that spoke to me was your determination to actually talk about the science, talk about how it can affect the society that we're in. And I think that's where that translation between theoretical research and applied research really sparks off in terms of all your publications that you've done. And I'm struck with your genuine commitment to that health promotion, from your journey at Glasgow University and Bangor University in the UK, and thankfully your turning down of Manchester Met University and coming to Otago a few years ago. That's a little bit of an aside. Sort of, we very nearly crossed paths because one of my past universities was also Man-Met, Manchester Metropolitan University in Manchester. I'm a Mancunian, by the way. And I'm really grateful that our paths had now crossed, because I'm going to be in the audience to listen towards your work in terms of understanding how your research has affected both national and international programs in sports science and exercise and recovery in all of those areas. Now, I can go on and talk to you all about how fantastic Elaine is, and she is, and also how fantastic her family have been in terms of supporting her through that. But you have committed your energy and your passion and your determination and professionalism to Otago University. And we would like to thank you for that. I would welcome you to the stage to talk to the audience who are eagerly anticipating your inaugural professorial lecture. So without further ado, I would like to say, Professor Elaine Hargreaves, please step up.
Tēnā koutou katoa, e te mana whenua o tēnei rohi kai tahu kati mamoi waitaha tēnā koutou. E haroha whakatō e aroha ka pute mai. No Perth ko Tarana aho ke Otipoti taku kaianga, ko Rosemary Hargreaves o Kuwhānau, ko Elaine tōku ingoa, e ahorangi ahau ke te kurapara whakawai ahau I mahi ana. He tangata tiriti au no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Phew. So I am a bit overwhelmed, obviously, by the number of people that are sitting in the audience. And I want to start by saying thank you, just in case I forget a little bit later. Now, I've sat in the audience of many IPLs and thought, what a wonderful job everyone has done. And now I realise how nervous everybody must have been while standing here, because that's how I feel right now. So I apologise if my brain-to-mouth connection doesn't quite get there. And I have scripted it, which is not normal for me, but I do know if I don't script it, then I could go off on tangents and we could be here for days. So I shall kick off. So as is normal, a little bit about me, and I guess my largely conventional journey on how I came to be at Otago Whakaihu Waka. So I grew up in Perth in Scotland, a fantastic small city known as the gateway to the Highlands, with the beautiful River Tay running through it. My dad, Colin, started his own haulage business when I was 8 years old and spent many summers travelling with him back and forward to Europe in the truck, which probably sounds more glamorous than it actually was. My mum Anne trained to be a nurse at the same time I was completing my important high school exams. So we would study in separate parts of the house and then come together at the end of the day to watch Coronation Street, something that we're still doing now that she is here. Mum kept all my school report cards, and some of those comments wouldn't say I was possibly the best student in the world, with one of my teachers commenting here, Elaine works exceedingly well, and although the results possibly fall short of her expectations, there's no complaints with her effort. So we'll put effort over ability every time. Clearly things could only go up from there. Luckily, I had an aptitude for physical education, which was the only merit certificate I received while I was at high school. So I applied to study sports science at Glasgow Uni and was offered a conditional entry that I get a B in my final year biology exam. It was the hardest exam I had ever taken, and I remember coming home and asking Mum if she would sign me up to do my truck driving licence so I could join Dad's business because I wouldn't be going to uni. Luckily, even though I got a C in that exam, I did get accepted to Glasgow. So I headed off an hour down the road at 17 and a half years old, a bit fresh, a bit naive, to the big city of Glasgow, where I spent 4 years with quite a small cohort studying physiology and sports science. So I graduated with a BSc Honours First Class, and very surprisingly to me, I'm probably the teacher that wrote that comment. I did graduate with the highest GPA, so I was pretty proud of myself. Maybe my intellect had finally caught up with my effort. So it was at Glasgow that I was introduced to exercise psychology by Professor Nanette Maitre, who, alongside Stuart Biddle, was pioneering the research in this newish field of study. Now, it resonated really strongly with me, and I realised what was the point of understanding all the physiological benefits of physical activity if we can't get people to do it. And it was here that my passion for health promotion started. And the picture up there is a picture with Nanette that was taken 2 years ago, so we still catch up for a walk when we go back to Scotland. So after my exams, I talked to Nanette about where my career should take me. I was trying to decide whether to do a top master's in health promotion or applying for a research master's that Glasgow was offering. And Nanette made it brutally clear to me that with my grades, no one would say, well done, you did a master's. They would say, why did you not do a PhD? So she sent me off to apply for a PhD scholarship that was on offer at the University of Wales, Bangor. So PhD scholarship in hand, off I went. Now a 6-hour journey down the road for Mum to come and visit. And I was supervised by Gaynor, whose picture's up there, and who's now at Adelaide Uni, and David Markland, who's now retired. I graduated in 2001, and at the same time, my modelling career took off. And you can see in the top picture there is me running on the treadmill and becoming the poster child for the cover of the department's advertising material. Definitely a much better picture than my PhD graduation. These hats are not flattering when you've got curly chin-length ginger hair. I do now wish I had invested in the robes because they're very pretty, a little bit prettier than the plain old Bangor Otago ones. So the PhD's done. I'm back home living with Mum and Dad, wondering what's next. I applied for 3 health promotion positions, still keen to get into that industry, wasn't offered any of them. And as Charles said, Gaynor passed on 2 lecturing position opportunities, one here at Otago and another at Manchester Met in the UK. Never really wanted to get into academia, but with no other job offers, I decided to apply for both of them, was offered both of them, and thought, oh well, this seems to be where my skill set was wanted. Now, what Charles didn't say was that the dean of the school at that time, Keith Davids, had just moved from Manchester Met to Otago and knew that I had been offered the Manchester Met job as I was being offered the Otago job. So I think he was pushing hard that I took this one. Excuse me. So that's how I landed in Dunedin, the Edinburgh of the South, and if anybody has heard that, the Gaelic translation of Dunedin is up there, which is where it comes from. I decided that if I was going to be a lecturer in academia, then I'd better do it in Otago rather than Manchester Met. And if nothing else, it would be like an OE on the other side of the world, and I would be building my CV at the same time. I'm now as far away from Scotland as I can possibly get, much to my parents' dismay. Here I am 24 years later. Being very fresh-faced and no experience of negotiating, I started on the first rung of the lecturer scale and have worked my way up to significant leadership and now to professor. 25-year-old me would never have thought this would have happened, and neither probably did my dad, who asked back in 1993 why I even wanted to go to university. So that's me. Now I feel a little bit less nervous, which is good. So my plan for the next 40-odd minutes is just to take you through 3 strands of research that I've conducted so far that are all connected through the theme of choice. It took me about 4 hours to write that title. It seemed really simple, but I just couldn't figure out how to connect everything, so we settled on this theme of choice. So without going off on tangents, hopefully we won't be here any longer than 40 minutes. I tend to waffle on tangents, so I'm going to try and not do that. So, to put the title of the presentation into context, so the benefits of being physically active are well known. Researchers know them, health professionals know them, and according to data from Sport New Zealand, the public know how much benefit we can get from being physically active, both physically and mentally. However, the statistics for physical activity don't show that people are translating the knowledge of those benefits into actual behaviour. And the most recent stats we have say that only 47% of New Zealanders perform the 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity physical activity that will lead to those health benefits. So the picture on the right of the screen there are the physical activity guidelines if you aren't aware of them. Similar picture is shown in physical activity statistics worldwide. So this tells us that becoming more physically active is more complicated than simply telling people why they should be active and expecting them to do it. However, I also want to point out at this time that those of you who use lack of time as an excuse to not be physically active, that is also not valid. So time use studies tell us that when you take away all the non-negotiable time that we spend with childcare, with work and other things we can't get out of, there is still enough discretionary time in our day to dedicate to being physically active if we want to or if we choose to. So motivation research provides us a way to understand the factors that can support people to prioritise their time to being physically active, because we all make the choices in where we're prioritising that time. Now, I also want to say, if there was physical activity researchers in the audience, which there are a few, they will go, you're going to use the terms physical activity and exercise interchangeably. There's a lengthy debate around what those terms are that I don't have to go into, so you'll forgive me, but I'm going to probably use exercise more than physical activity, because it's just easier and more quick to say. So it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge that understanding how we can promote physical activity is bigger than just psychology. And as the socio-ecological framework illustrates here, psychology is important because ultimately it's the individual's decision whether to exercise or not. So that comes from within the individual. But that decision doesn't happen without being influenced by our social environment, so the people around us, but also the policies and the practices that are afforded within our environment. So if our environment doesn't support us, then we can't be physically active even if we choose to. So a lovely example of this framework in practice was illustrated when the stairs in an underground in Sweden were transformed into a piano. So you'll recognize this scenario. You come to a decision whether you have to choose to take the stairs or you have to choose to take the escalator or go up in the lift. The majority of people will pack into the escalator and few choose to take the stairs. So I've put a wee video here because if there's one thing that you remember about my presentation, you might remember the cool video that I showed. So watch what happens when they made a change to these stairs. So a simple change to the environment can influence physical activity choice. So more people took the stairs, the more people that are taking the stairs, the more we think, oh, everyone's doing it, so I will do it as well. So just a nice example of how we can change the environment and a social environment to make a change in somebody's decision making. Now, I've just left that up. It says fun can obviously change behaviour for the better. So one of the key messages from this example is that when people feel good being physically active, then it becomes an easier choice. And what a lovely segue into the start of some research that we have done. So this idea that how we feel, or in the academic world, it's called the role of affective to exercises as a motivator for physical activity, is kind of well known. So when I started this research, the exercise prescription industry was gaining some traction or momentum, and there were more personal trainers in the world. There were more health professionals prescribing exercise to improve health. So I was interested in how this research could use them to help improve their practices. So if they were working with someone to improve their, or to increase their exercise behaviour, how could they help them to do that over the long term? So this term affect refers to how we feel, and it encapsulates all the moods and the emotions that you're experiencing or feeling at a particular time. Now, to measure affect, we use this feeling scale, which is probably the easiest and the simplest scale ever invented in psychology. So we simply ask people to tell us how good they're feeling on a scale of +5 to -5. Now, affect is important because it has a motivational force. So how we feel in response to a particular situation influences whether or not we will choose to participate in that situation again. Theory tells us that it's human nature for people to choose to do things that feel good and avoid things that feel bad. So if we put this into the exercise context, when we exercise, we will feel a certain way. So we will have an affective response from our exercise session or the period of being physically active. Those affective responses are then represented in our memory. So when we're deciding again whether or not we're going to choose to exercise, then the memory of how we felt last time will influence that decision. So if we remember feeling good, it's more likely we'll do it again. If we remember feeling bad, then it's less likely that we are going to exercise again. Now, other research by Williams and colleagues has demonstrated the importance of affective responses in motivating exercise behaviour. So they showed that how people felt during a very short 10-minute walk predicted how much physical activity they did 6 months later. So they found that a 1-unit improvement in the feeling scale related to people doing 15 minutes more physical activity 6 months later. So this led us to wonder, well, what is it about that exercise experience that people remember when they're thinking back to how they felt? If for all of us that exercise, you know that you have the ups and downs. Sometimes it feels good, sometimes it doesn't quite feel so good. So how does all of that get represented in our memory when we're trying to decide to exercise again? So to investigate this, we had sedentary women exercise on a treadmill, and we measured their affective responses during and after their exercise. And then 2 and 7 days later, we asked them to remember back and rate how pleasant or unpleasant they remembered that exercise session to be on this very simple, again, -10 to +10 scale. So our research showed that 2 key moments in exercise that influence our affective memory: how the worst point at which we felt and how we felt right at the end of the exercise. Now, these points were more important than how people felt after exercise, which you might find surprising because everybody promotes physical activity as do something you will feel better afterwards. But what our research is showing, and what Williams's research showed, is that how we feel during exercise is more important to the decision making than how we feel afterwards. So our next challenge then was to understand how to make sure people feel good during exercise. And immediately it ended so that we can have those positive outcomes that will influence that affective memory and therefore future exercise decisions. Now, exercise intensity has the strongest influence on how we feel when we exercise. So as a starting point, researchers have been trying to find what is the optimum exercise intensity that we can prescribe that would lead everyone to experience these positive affective responses. So moderate intensity exercise seemed a sensible option because that's what the physical activity guidelines recommend. We also thought, now hang on, why as exercise prescribers do we always feel the need to tell people what to do all the time? If we want people to feel good, then let them choose their own exercise intensity because theory tells us they should choose an intensity that feels good. So in this study, we compared affective responses to 20 minutes of exercise at moderate intensity and at a self-selected intensity, again in a sample of sedentary women. So the first important result was that when given the choice, women exercised at a moderate intensity. So this is and it was very similar to the moderate intensity that we had prescribed or asked them to exercise at. Now this was significant because at the time, critics of the self-selected intensity approach were always telling us that people would not choose to exercise at moderate intensity. They'll take it really easy and they'll exercise at really low intensities and they won't get those health benefits. So this research was one of the first to show, well, actually, people will exercise at moderate intensity if you let them and you provide them with choice. So perhaps not, you don't have to tell them what to do all the time. So when we analysed the group affect data, we found that both intensities resulted in the same largely positive affective responses. But when you look at the black lines, the error bars in the graph there, it shows that there's quite a lot of variability in how people feel when they exercise at these 2 exercise intensities. So we recognized that by analysing the data at the group level, we were masking actually what was going on in the data. So we went back to the data and we looked at what each individual's affective response had been to those 2 intensities, and we found a much more interesting picture. So what we found was that over time, in the moderate condition, then 42% of our sample improved in their affective response over time, and 32% of the sample decreased in their affective response over time. Similarly, in the self-selected group, 47% increased and 26% decreased. So if you know anything about stats, if one group goes up and one group goes down, then basically your analysis shows nothing happened. So by looking at this variability, then it gave us this big picture that irrespective of what intensity we ask people to exercise at, some people will feel good and some people will feel not so good. So if we put that into a practical exercise prescription context, if we ask people to exercise at moderate intensity, there's a risk that it will result in that unpleasant exercise experience that has the knock-on effect for motivation. By allowing people to choose their own intensity, we still had that reduction in affect, which we hadn't expected. And so we were a bit interested to find out why that had happened. So in our next study, we explored what it was that people were thinking about while they were exercising that influenced their affective response and could explain the variations and why affect for some people goes up and others it goes down. So we had our active and inactive women exercise again at that self-selected and moderate intensity exercise. And then while they were exercising and giving us their response on the feeling scale, I basically had a microphone and I said, tell me, talk to me, what's going on? Why are you giving me this feeling scale result or response that you're giving me? So I wanted to find out what they were thinking about that led to that particular response. So the results here show the themes that we interpreted from the data. So very briefly, people feel good when they feel confident that they can continue and they can exercise comfortably. They felt a sense of achievement, or people feel good when they feel a sense of achievement, either from just actually doing something active or for achieving something that perhaps they didn't think they could, so exercising at a harder intensity than they had before. Affective state is also influenced where you have to focus your attention. So people feel good when they can dissociate from those physiological symptoms of exercise, so they don't have to concentrate on what their heart's doing, how their breathing is, or how their muscles are feeling. When we are focused on those physiological symptoms, then our affective response declines. Interestingly, the women talked a lot about how they interpreted those physiological symptoms to influence their affect. So for some people, they could feel their heart rate was pumping, or their heart was pumping, and they were like, that's good, that feels really good. Whereas for others, they could say, I feel my heart rate going, and that doesn't feel quite so good. So we also put an interpretation on those physiological symptoms. And I love this quote. When you're doing qualitative research and somebody gives you that quote that you're looking for, it's awesome. So she said, it's also almost like a systems approach. How's my breathing? How's my heart? Am I sweating too much? Do I feel uncomfortable? Do my legs hurt? No, everything's feeling good. Then I'm feeling good. Going into the study, we assumed that people would prefer to be in control of their own exercise intensity. But our perceptions of control theme was interesting. So we had one half of our sample tell us that they enjoyed or preferred to be in control because then they knew they could stop when they wanted, or they could change the intensity if it got too hard. Whereas the other group said it's actually a pleasurable state when I'm not in control because I don't have to decide when to stop. And actually, I know you wouldn't give me something to do that you didn't think I could do, so that we're supporting their perceptions of competence. So these thought processes provide insight on why the variability we found in those affective responses to those two exercise intensity exist, and provide the basis for strategies that can be used to support people to feel good during exercise. So, for example, we can ensure the exercise provides challenge, encourage people to positively reframe those physiological symptoms, or not even focus on them at all. Now, I'm sure many of you, when you're out exercising, might listen to music or a podcast. You might be exercising in nature, and you might be out exercising with friends. These are all ways that you can distract yourself from those physiological symptoms or help you to forget you're exercising in order to feel good. The strategy that we thought might work was, we thought if the aim of our research here is to get people to feel good while they're exercising, then why not ask them to feel good? So could we use the feeling scale to help people regulate their exercise intensity so they could choose an intensity that felt good, taking into account all of those thoughts that they have about what they need to feel good? So again, we took our sedentary women and we asked them to complete 4 sessions where they chose an intensity to feel good, and 4 where they chose an intensity to feel fairly good. And we were interested in what exercise intensity they chose, but also whether it would be consistent across those 4 sessions. So our results were really positive. So this graph shows that the intensity to feel good and to feel fairly good is a moderate intensity. There was a small but significant difference here. So there's a 4% difference in the intensity to feel good versus the intensity to feel fairly good. So this tells us that we're able to discriminate between an intensity that feels good and fairly good. The other thing you will notice is that people chose to increase their exercise intensity across time. So the intensity that feels good in the first 5 or 10 minutes is very different to the intensity that people choose to feel good or fairly good in the last 10 minutes. And again, that will be influenced by those cognitive factors that influence how we're appraising our exercise. So I asked the question again, why do exercise prescribers feel the need and compelled to tell people what to exercise at all the time? From a psychological perspective, using this method of intensity regulation means that people will have a pleasant exercise experience, eliminates the risk of any negative peak affect that we know influences memory. And even if we get our prescription wrong by that 4%, then that could be enough to drop people's affective response. And that could be enough to discourage future participation because the experience is less pleasant than they are willing to tolerate. Also, this method might also provide the extra motivation people need on those days where they don't feel like it, because they know that they can exercise to regulate, or they can regulate their intensity to feel good and actually use exercise as a method of feeling better. So a significant impact of this research was its inclusion, finally, in the 8th edition of the American College of Sports Medicine Guidelines for Exercise Testing and Prescription in 2010. So as we noted in the review paper that we published, ACSM finally recognised the importance of affect, recommending that the feeling scale be used as an adjunct method of monitoring exercise intensity and as a means of supporting adherence to exercise prescription. So we took this as a win. Now, this is quite significant because these guidelines are followed by thousands of exercise practitioners worldwide, and hopefully means our work has been translated into practice in the industry and not just by the students that I teach in my exercise psych class. So switching tack a little onto the second parallel stream of research that is still within that theme of choice. This is our work that's been underpinned by self-determination theory. So very briefly, self-determination theory explains that it's not what we want to achieve from exercise that it's important to motivate behaviour, but rather it's why we want to achieve those outcomes. So participation motives reflect what people say they want to get out of being active. And they typically fall under the themes of changing their appearance, hanging out with friends, because they enjoy it or they enjoy the challenge, and also because they want to get those health and fitness benefits. Self-determination theory describes two forms of motivation that explain the regulatory force behind our behaviour. So that is why we want to achieve those particular outcomes. So autonomous motivation is where we exercise because we enjoy it. It's part of who we are. We can see the value and the extrinsic benefits that we get from being active. Those things are important to us. Controlled motivation, on the other hand, is where we feel compelled to exercise because of some external or internal pressure. We feel we have to or need to exercise, perhaps because we've been told to by someone else, or because we have that internal pressure and we feel guilty if we don't. Now, interestingly, two people can have the same motive for exercise. So, for example, exercising to improve their health. For one, the reason may stem from autonomous motivation because they can see the value of being in good health. For the other, their reason might stem from controlled motivation because they've been to the GP and the GP has said if you don't exercise, then your health will suffer. So going back, it's that regulatory motivation, the why we have or why we want to achieve those motives that we know influence physical activity behaviour. So we did some survey-based research to examine the autonomous and controlled motivation in people who were at different stages of decision-making for physical activity. So our research showed that these two forms of motivation can distinguish those who are exercising to those who are not exercising. So autonomous motivation was higher in those who were exercising compared to those who were just thinking about exercising or not thinking about exercising in the near future. So we can see that autonomous motivation is higher than people who are out there doing it and lower in those who haven't started yet. Controlled motivation, on the other hand, was higher in those preparing to start, so just getting ready to get into some physical activity, and those who had just started. So this study adds to a wealth of established research base shows that for sustained engagement in physical activity, autonomous motivation is important. Now, although controlled motivation can motivate people to start, generally because they haven't yet appreciated the inherent value that being physically active can bring. So they're exercising out of pressure rather than out of choice, and we know that that's detrimental to long-term engagement. So we're trying to get people to be motivated through autonomous means rather than doing it because they feel they have to or they feel they need to. So then I can hear you say, your next question is, how do people develop autonomous motivation? So Matthew Jenkins, for his PhD, explored the theoretical causes of autonomous motivation and its relationship to physical activity behaviour. I guess, again, doing some cross-sectional research where we gave out some motivation questionnaires and a measure of physical activity and looked at the relationship. So his results, illustrated in the blue box, the study was a bit bigger than I'm explaining today. He showed that there was a very strong and significant relationship between autonomous motivation and weekly physical activity behaviour. He showed that for people to experience autonomous motivation, then they need to have choice over their actions. They need to feel in control of their own behaviour and not feel pressured to participate. People need to feel capable and confident that they can be successful and meet any physical activity challenge. And lastly, they need to feel a sense of connection and feel like they're being supported by the people that are within the exercise environment. So I'm pretty confident that when you think back to the ups and downs through your own exercise journeys, you can link a lack of motivation or low motivation to times where you felt you had to exercise. Perhaps you couldn't see the point anymore. You weren't feeling any of those benefits. It all just felt a bit too hard, or you weren't feeling connected to those people that you were exercising with. So by implementing strategies that can help us feel confident, feel connected and in control, we can make physical activity the easier choice and help us move from feeling like I have to exercise to I want to exercise. So here comes my identity crisis. So about 15 years ago, I had an identity crisis with what my research expertise was and whether I was achieving my desire to make a difference in health promotion. So whilst this research had added significantly to theory around how to motivate physical activity behaviour, I started feeling like perhaps I should be doing physical activity interventions where I could implement the theory to change people's physical activity behaviour. So this coincided with a period of study leave where I spent 6 months at Strathclyde Uni back with Nanette and her physical activity research group. And it was here I found out about the wonderful football fans in training programme that was being conducted throughout Scotland. In this programme, inactive and overweight men went along to a 12-week programme that was delivered within the professional football clubs, where they were supported to improve their lifestyle behaviours through exercise and education sessions around lots of lifestyle behaviour change. And it also incorporated key strategies that were designed to improve autonomous motivation. Also drew on men's connection to their clubs as a football fan to provide a supportive environment where behaviour change could happen. So after going along to one of those sessions, I thought, right, this is going to be amazing for New Zealand. New Zealand's main fascination for rugby is just as big as men in Scotland's fascination for football. And so can we use the power of rugby to motivate men to improve their health? Now, after too many years of trying to get funding and 2 periods of maternity leave to have my wonderful children, Professor Ralph Maddison, who was at Auckland Uni at the time, and I finally received HRC funding to run a pilot trial, and then in 2019 to conduct an effectiveness trial of Are You Fit New Zealand, which was modelled off the football fans in training programme, but adapted to the New Zealand and the rugby context. So we ran our trial in conjunction with the Otago Highlanders, the Canterbury Crusaders, and the Auckland Blues. Now, at the same time, other fans and training programmes were being conducted worldwide in European football, in Canadian ice hockey, and in Australian rules football over in Perth. So we were part of this big international programme of research establishing the benefits of sport-based interventions to improve men's health. So this kicked off a real interest for me in men's health, which is a significant issue for New Zealand and worldwide. So just up on the left there is a recent report that was published with input from our Otago University Centre for Men's Health, which shows that around 42% of male deaths occur prematurely before men reach the age of 75, and the rate of premature death is 1.5 times higher than that of women. For the most part, that's caused by conditions that are treatable and, more importantly, preventable with the right support. So these fans and training programs were one of the few at the time that focused specifically just on supporting men to change their lifestyle behaviours using strategies that resonate specifically with men. So the lovely schematic that we put together there shows the outcomes and how Are You Fit NZ was conducted. So it was extremely successful despite recruitment and delivery being interrupted when the world imploded in 2020. The men who participated lost and sustained a 3-kilogram weight loss 1 year after the programme had finished, took inches off their waistline, but more important from my perspective, they improved their physical activity and fitness levels and were eating better. So our research that examined what it was about the programme that kept them engaged linked very strongly to those determinants of autonomous motivation. So they felt connected to and supported by their male peers, who they were all in the same boat, working towards the same outcomes. So there was a very supportive group of men all working together to support each other. The content of the education and the exercise sessions built their competence to be more active and to make small changes to their lifestyle. So that might be not having a pie every day for lunch, but just having a pie every couple of days for lunch. And they felt empowered to make those changes because they wanted to and because they had this support around them. Now, in Scotland, the Football Fans in Training programme is funded now by the Scottish Government. It's been running now for 15 years, both at Premier League level and also through the lower league football clubs. The challenge we have in New Zealand is finding a way for this programme to be rolled out as a health promotion programme. So we did some scale-out research and we interviewed stakeholders to ask about their views on the programme and how they could help us get this in and be funded to be offered throughout New Zealand. And although those stakeholders from rugby, from sport, from health promotion fields think it's an extremely valuable programme and should be implemented worldwide, it's not their core business to fund or implement. So unfortunately, it still currently remains languishing in the academic journals rather than being available to support men to improve their health. But I will continue the good fight. The nice picture here is taken from our one of the final wrap-up sessions from the Dunedin-based group. Buxton Popualihi, who you'll see up here, was an ex-Highlander and an ex-rugby, New Zealand Rugby Sevens player, and he delivered the programme for us. And he told his story to the men right at the start, and you might not be aware, but he went in for surgery for a heart condition, and he never knew if he was going to make it out of the surgery. So he stood up and spoke his story to the men, which provided, I guess, the focus for it, going, I had this opportunity, or I had this problem that wasn't preventable. You now have a chance to improve your lifestyles to make a change. And luckily, one of his best mates was Ben Smith, and he came and gave the graduation certificates at the end for us. So, in conclusion, from my research, I would say that to make physical activity the simple choice, then ensure that you feel good while you're doing it. Concentrate on how good exercise will feel if you choose to do it. Focus on the value that physical activity can bring to life as the reason to do it, rather than feeling it's something you have to do. And these factors will help overcome the barriers that we all face in prioritising time in our lives to be active. So for me, what's next? Well, I'm going back full circle to my roots and starting a very exciting project with Dr. Meredith Perry from Nutrition Department, alongside some colleagues in the UK and the New Zealand trucking industry, to understand how to improve the health and lifestyle behaviours of New Zealand truck drivers. And hopefully we might get more traction within the health promotion industry, or at the very least, I'll get photographed, again, doing random physical activities in random places for a media, for some media posts. Apologies, Meredith, I should have asked your permission before I posted that one. That one was in the ODT, I think, yeah. So, just to finish, obviously want to extend my thanks to my amazing colleagues who I've worked with over the last 24 years at Otago, particularly those that took the slack over the last 4 years when I was Dean and have kept up my research productivity. Thanks also go to my PhD students, past and current, who've been a joy to work with and who are forging their own career paths in academia research or using their behaviour change expertise to improve workplace productivity and culture. This is where I'm probably going to start to cry, but that's all right. So as well as being extremely proud of myself for this promotion and getting it just before I turned 50, which was a goal, I want to say how grateful I am for the support of the school for the staff in the School of Physical Education, Sport and Exercise Sciences, and how proud I am of the work that we achieved over the last 4 years. So thank you for trusting the fate of the school to me back then. I'm extremely proud of my wonderful children, Anya and Talia, who gave me the title Boss Lady and who astound me daily with their sporting and academic abilities. You'll now be able to tell people what it is that Mum does. I'm proud and grateful to my husband Gareth, who juggles his day job with his side hustle, designing products that are used nationwide to build mountain bike tracks and to rid New Zealand of wilding pines. Alongside making sure my bike is fit and ready to ride as per his wedding vows. So now that you know I've spent my career researching the importance of choice, you'll understand why I'm a control freak. Yeah. To my parents, oh, I should have put the pictures up of my wonderful children doing all these random adventures that I dream up. To my parents, I'm sure you would rather not have to travel to the other side of the world to see us, but you've always supported my choices and provided a home to come back to whenever I needed it, so I'm thankful for that. I'm extremely proud of you guys for the success you made of your own careers, and I'm grateful for you for looking after us so well when you come to Dunedin each year for a holiday. I haven't cooked dinner since January for when Mum arrived, which has been wonderful. The hills we're walking up these days are not quite as steep or as long as Mount Roy or Ben Lawers, which is the other picture, but you still go along with my crazy adventures. Lastly, to you all, thank you, and I'm grateful that you chose to prioritise your time to come and listen tonight. Thank you, and I hope you now have the urge to get out and get some physical activity, and the next time you have to make the choice between taking the stairs or the lift or the escalator, you will take the stairs because you'll know it will feel good. So thank you.
Vice Chancellor, members of the academic party, colleagues, friends, and whānau, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Mike Sam toko ingoa o I manukataki te kura whakawai. Greetings, my name is Mike Sam. I'm the acting dean of the School of Physical Education, Sport, and Exercise Sciences. Elaine, thank you. What a wonderful presentation. It made me feel like exercising, but it also made me feel like eating a pie. So both things are good in my view. Now this evening you've taken us through the three connected strands of research, all bound by a deceptively simple idea of choice. What's particularly striking was not just the coherence of this body of work, but that it has relevance. You reminded us that physical activity behavior is not just a public policy concern, but a very human puzzle as well, bound up with how people feel, how free they feel, and how they come to see themselves through movement. And in that sense, your work sits squarely at the forefront of contemporary research around physical activity and health, recognizing behavior, experience, and identity as mutually constitutive rather than as separable parts. Now, despite these insights, it's worth noting that Elaine has, on occasion, spoken openly about feelings of imposter syndrome. As many in this room will recognize, that particular affliction tends to be found almost exclusively among those who combine genuine excellence and genuine humility. Tonight's lecture offered us ample reassurance, as if there was any needed anyway, that her place here as professor has been earned for quite some time. Elaine joined the school in 2002 and has been a team player from the outset. She's built and sustained strong collaborations with departments of physiotherapy, human nutrition, psychology, and beyond, enriching not only her own research and intellectual life, but the school as well. Her leadership as dean was, by any measure, superlative. Thoughtful, steady, principled. She's left the school in excellent shape, and future leaders will benefit from the foundations she put in place. Equally significant has Elaine's role been as a mentor. Former PhD students speak of her courage, conviction, and kindness, and an ethos shaped by a deep, deep desire to understand the mechanisms that make meaningful implementation possible. One recalls Elaine taking a gamble on a doctoral student she had never met and providing a remarkably soft landing in both academia and Aotearoa. Another highlights the exceptionally high standards she sets. Maybe that's control, matched by the quality of support she gives in return. Across these accounts runs a common theme. Elaine places people first, prioritizes well-being, connection, and community. And it's this, as much as any individual achievement, that defines her lasting impact. Outside the usual academic metrics, Elaine can also point to her most valuable outputs, her children and happy family life, and to some strategically planned periods of leave that's associated with them. And unless anyone think that her interest in physical activity is purely academic, she has been and remains a formidable athlete in both netball, badminton, reminding us that a scholarship and lived practice need not be strangers. Elaine, it's really my greatest pleasure on behalf of the university and the school to congratulate you on this milestone and to present you with a small token of our appreciation, marking your inaugural professorial lecture and recognizing your many contributions as a scholar, leader, colleague, and mentor. Finally, thank you to our audience for joining us this evening and for sharing in this important occasion. In just a few more minutes, I would warmly invite you to join the academic party for refreshments in the staff club, where I'm sure the conversations about choice, motivation, pies, I hope, and feeling good while moving will continue.
Kia